business.
You start a business? What would the business be?
Like something short like how people be doing.
Say that again.
I said something short like how people be doing. I said clothing line, yo, you chilling. I just gotta get it tough. Something, Mr. J.
What's going
You out
on?
of pocket. How we gotta be on time and you know. You asleep.
I was not. I didn't hear nothing. Except Miss Kelsey called me. My fault, y'all. Oh my God.
That's what our alarm clock is for. If I gotta be to school on time, you gotta be to work on time.
You are getting called out today.
Look, I got out 10 minutes before class. I thought I was gonna miss it, but I made it.
I was.
You did make it.
My fault. I
You
apologize.
out of pocket.
I was doing
yeah,
business.
Kelsey.
Let me see who I got.
Kelsey, I make the clothing line. You know, 'cause that's what everybody doing. That's how I start off my black business. Or I open up a potty store. Chilling. Yeah.
Anyone else?
I would open up a professional sleep center where people could get sleep that work too much.
Yeah. I would be first in line.
Quay. Good morning, Ahmad.
That's good.
Whose iPhone?
Rajay, Alan Ponder.
Okay, Rajay. All right. So did these ladies give you a good morning meeting while I was catching Z's?
Yeah, bro. Yeah.
Ain't nobody gonna snitch me out, right?
No,
I ain't worry about no phone calls later or concerns. Nobody's gonna snitch me out. Nobody's dropping dimes on me. All right, that's what's up. Okay.
I ain't gonna lie, I'm about to go back to sleep myself though.
No, you got. We up now. We up now. We gotta get going here. Sorry about that. All right. Okay. So good morning. Welcome to me and late. This is African American Studies, correct? Yes.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you don't know what class it was?
I just woke up like 4 minutes ago. I'm here. I got it. It's African American Studies. It's a hybrid of social sciences. So I wanted to review Nat Turner and the Slave Revolt of 1831. I have an article for you on Lewis Lattimore, who was a good morning, Miss Cat, by the way, which was a inventor. We're going to talk about the abolitionists, the 13th and 15th Amendments, John Brown and Frederick Douglass, and a video on John Brown and early abolitionists. So I don't know which class, if at the end of the last class we were having a discussion. We're going to go back and look at Nat Turner real quick before we go into abolitionists, okay? So let's just review the essential questions that I have for you for today. And the first one is, how does social change happen? That's one of our essential questions. In society, how does social change happen? We looked at and studied Nat Turner and some of the conditions Nat Turner was stuck underneath in slavery. And I think that before we stopped the last class, we were having the discussion on whether or not, let me see if this may not be the same group, but I'm going to ask it anyhow. Let me go back to Nat Turner real quick. So Nat Turner, he had a revolt in August of 1831 where he basically uprose and killed his slave masters and the family and everyone who was in charge of slavery at that time. So we did Jim Crow. So the question that we had, I think before we left last time, we watched the video on Nat Turner, what Nat Turner did, right? I think that's the last thing we did. You guys there?
Yeah.
Was that the last thing we did? We watched the video on Nat Turner?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. Do we remember why Nat Turner revolted? What was his reasoning?
Hold on, let me look at my notes.
Let's just do a quick review, okay? So, slavery. Nat Turner was in a state of slavery. And if you look at these notes right here, beginning in 1619, African peoples began either being sold, stolen, or sometimes abducted and tricked into the cruel practice of human slavery. So in 1619, which is about 401 years ago, or almost 402 years ago now, people were started to be brought to America in slavery. I have a quick video on the conditions of slavery, because in order to understand a social movement, we must first understand what was going on in society. Let's see, is this it? I think so. This should be a short video here describing how people were brought over to America in slave ships. So let's just take a moment and watch that.
We are St. Joseph's University. We're up for anything, to be ready for an ever-changing future, so that we succeed again and again.
The PowerPoint and not the video.
Learn more at sju.edu.
From about 1525 to 1866, 12.5 million Africans were taken from their homeland and forcibly shipped across the Atlantic, a journey that almost 2 million of them wouldn't survive. By the turn of the 18th century, European merchants were building vessels capable of transporting hundreds of slaves per journey. These ships had extra portholes for ventilation, weapons...
Can you help me with the video?
Oh, okay.
I'm going to PowerPoint.
I'm sorry. I
No,
saw.
that's okay.
Can you see it now?
Yes.
All right,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
and forcibly shipped across the Atlantic, a journey that almost 2 million of them wouldn't survive. By the turn of the 18th century, European merchants were building vessels capable of transporting hundreds of slaves per journey. These ships had extra portholes for ventilation, weapons mounted on deck in case of rebellion, and additional compartments added below deck to take on more human cargo. Before boarding the ships at African port cities, slaves were stripped of their clothing and remaining possessions and had their heads completely shaved. During boarding, which could take weeks or even months, slaves lived on the deck of the ship in a temporary wooden house constructed by the crew. The crew also installed netting around the deck of the ship, designed to catch slaves who might opt for death over forced servitude. Once moved below deck, slaves would find themselves stuffed into compartments with ceilings as low as 4.5 feet, where they would spend most of their voyage. They were segregated by gender and age. Adult men were kept separately and shackled in pairs. Women usually left unbound in their designated compartment, and children often free to move about the ship. There was no plumbing of any kind. Slaves were forced to relieve themselves where they sat, creating hellish conditions when combined with the heat and lack of ventilation below deck. Disease was rampant. Measles, smallpox, influenza, scurvy, and dysentery, the #1 killer, ravaged slaves and crew members alike. The slaves generally spent about 8 hours a day above deck, but were still separated by gender with a barricado, a reinforced wall that could be used to protect crew members in case of a revolt. Slaves were also subject to forced exercise, sometimes including dance and song for the entertainment of the crew. Disobedient slaves were tortured and beaten, usually whipped with the especially cruel cat-o'-nine-tails, a tool designed to inflict maximum pain. Slaves who refused to eat their typical meal of rice and beans were forced to do so, sometimes with the speculum oris, a medieval tool used to pry open unwilling mouths. Women, while usually left unshackled, were raped and sexually abused by members of the crew, sometimes arriving in the New World carrying the children of their attackers. But it was the women, using their minuscule freedoms, who would often coordinate mutinies against their captors. But these rebellions were rarely successful. The true extent of the horrors of the Middle Passage came to light in a 1783 court trial over the slave ship Zong. The Zong left Africa in 1781 with 442 enslaved on board. After a 2-month journey riddled with navigation errors, 62 slaves and 7 crew members had perished without reaching their destination. Disease was spreading throughout the ship, and fresh water was running dangerously low. Captain Luke Collingwood was afraid of the financial costs of more deaths. Slaves that died of disease were not covered by the ship's insurance, but slaves who drowned were. Some 133 slaves were thrown overboard. Collingwood claimed it was necessary to do so to halt the spread of disease. At the trial between the Zong's owners and their insurance company, the owners argued that because it was legal to kill sick animals for the health of a ship, it was legal to treat infected slaves the same. The court agreed. But the trial itself exposed the horrors aboard the Zong. The story was republished by British abolitionists with the name of the ship redacted, meant to show that this tragedy could happen on any slave ship across the Middle Passage. 24 years after the Zong trial, the slave trade was outlawed in both Great Britain and the United States. It would take England another 26 years, and the U.S. another 58, plus a civil war, before the practice of slavery was banned outright.
Okay, so I know that's not the most uplifting topic to start the morning, but we have to have some kind of baseline idea to understand the conditions that people who were in slavery were subjected to. So, as you can see in the video, there was inhumane treatment. People sometimes were stolen. Some people were tricked into going into servitude. Even on the slave ships themselves, the conditions were deplorable. You had people stacked in kind of like human, I mean, the only way to really compare it would be like human rats being jammed into these boats. So the atrocities that were committed against African peoples and those of African slaves and dissidents during this time were unmeasurably cruel and heartbreaking. The list of cruelties just goes on and on for people who were coming over in the slave trade. So slaves had every aspect of their life controlled by others. They had no autonomy and freedom for self. Some fought, some ran, some accepted their fate. It really depended on the individual. Because of the treatment of the American Negro and North American, social change began to happen in the mid-1800s. Now, there had been other revolts long before the mid-1800s, but in the 1800s, it's significant is because the passage of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, where Black Americans started to make social progress. So years of physical, psychological, emotional, and economical abuse had reached a boiling point. We looked at the boiling point the last class with Nat Turner. And today we're going to talk about abolitionists, who abolitionists were and what they did. Let me see, I have a chat here. Sorry. Okay, I'm on. Who abolitionists were and what they believed. So a question for you guys. During this time in slavery, were all people who were non-Black slave masters? So basically, were all people who were white, were they slave masters? And did they agree with slavery? What have you guys been taught? Were all whites, were they slave masters? What do you think, Quay? Do you think that all whites at that time were slave masters according to history?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'm gonna say all. I say majority.
Okay. Majority. More historically, we had two parts of this country that fought in the Civil War, the North and the South. Not everybody in the North was anti-slavery, and not everybody in the South was pro-slavery. There were people who, across the spectrum, some places like New Jersey was one of the last states to abolish slavery, which is kind of weird because New Jersey's in the North. But not all white people were slave masters. There were people who oppose slavery, and they are called abolitionists. Three of those big name abolitionists were Frederick Douglass, John Brown, and Nat Turner. So we talked about Jim Crow laws, by the way. That was your checkpoint number 1. So this is from the last class. Based off of what you saw in that video, if you had to describe American slavery in 3 words or less, how would you describe it? What words would you use to describe American slavery based off of what you saw? You can put it in the chat, or you can just tell me audibly. Give me 3 words or less to describe American slavery. I'll give you a word to start. It was cruel. Okay, I got a chat. Torturous. Thank you, Miss Kelsey. So torturous. What do you think, Zaire? What do you think about American slavery? If you had to describe it in less than 3 words.
Very disrespectful. They was out of pocket. And they was in some drunk stuff.
Okay. I understand the last 2. Definitely drawn, definitely out of pocket. It's cruel, torturous, disrespectful, inhumane, and the list just goes on and on with these adjectives to describe American slavery. And in the video, it didn't really get into the daily life of slaves in America, but these people were subjected, people who were in a state of slavery were subjected to every whim that their master had. Okay, Quay. They would have to do everything that the master wanted, regardless of what it was. Whether it was families were separated. What's that, Anisha? Okay. Families were separated. People were murdered. People were raped, hung, all types of things. And really it depended on the master. But the type of sacrifices that slaves had to make each day was to basically swallow their own pride. And if they even had pride, but they were basically subjected to the whims and demands of a slave master. So I think I asked you in another class, what would you do if you were stuck in a state of slavery? We're going to look at the 13th and 14th Amendment. I wanted to show you a stat, an article. There's a connection here. It's called Demystifying the 13th Amendment. And the 13th Amendment, we're going to look at again, was supposed to be the undoing of slavery in America. But I found out actually that there are more people in prison today of color than there was pre-Civil War in America, which is a kind of a shocking stat. It's okay, Anisha, welcome. We're talking about the 13th and 14th Amendment. And well, we're talking about social change, but we're defining what slavery was and how people were treated. So in this article here, we're learning that in the 13th Amendment, there is a clause, and it says that no person should be held in a state of involuntary servitude, except as punishment for a crime, whereas the party shall be duly convicted. So the 13th Amendment did outlaw slavery, but it kept in a clause for those who were considered to be committed of a crime. So in 2005, the 2 million largely Black people incarcerated in America are legally considered slaves under the Constitution. So did we realize that once you are a prisoner, technically by the Constitution, you are once again a slave? So I'm going to say that again because some people don't understand what that means. Once you are incarcerated, once you are put inside a system, you are technically stripped of your constitutional rights. If you think about slaves, they were held in chains all day. They were made to do labor. They were told what to do. What's the difference between that and being a prisoner? So there is more people today after the 13th Amendment, like the 13th Amendment slavery loophole. There are more people today of color in jail than there was pre-Civil War. So even up to 1787, the 13th Amendment really didn't stop slavery from happening. It stopped legal slavery, but all you had to do was be arrested and you could be put back into a state of servitude. So all these restrictions were Jim Crow laws and the Black codes. These were all these restrictions that Black people were placed in their life, education, travel, leisure, land ownership, social dealings, social mobility, housing, even bathroom and toilet differences, and even entrances for movies, for eating, for dining, and all those just small everyday things. If you go on Summit, I put a bunch of information up on there. All the PowerPoints are up. All the links for the Jim Crow laws are up, and your checkpoint 1 is due also on Summit. And if you need to know what checkpoint 1 is about, it is about Jim Crow laws and how they have slowed down Black Americans, or how they have prohibited Black Americans over the last 160, 170 years. So slavery, how is or was slavery ever a justified or humane way to treat another person? We don't have to go over that question to understand that slavery is wrong. And the 13th Amendment, even though how much it was celebrated, it left the door open for those who were prisoners still in the United States. And even prisoners today are being used as slaves, even if the US Constitution is not directly clear about those who were state of bondage. So even though the 13th Amendment freed slaves and freed all people from involuntary servitude, there was what we call a loophole. And that was except for those who were held in a state of bondage. And today we have more people in jail than we did before the Civil War, which is kind of frightening. So Nat Turner, he fought back. We had a discussion about this. He revolted. He fought back against his slave masters. He took on about 75 to 100 men and started killing random, everybody, white people that they saw. And they believed that it was holy retribution. This idea of holy retribution was that it was God's will for Nat Turner to kill these people. So we watched the video. I think right before we left, we were having a conversation on whether or not Nat Turner was justified. So looking at the state of slavery that Black Americans were in, for those who have an idea of, some people are pacifists, which means they don't fight back. Some people are militants who fight back. Some people are what's the word I'm looking for? They've kind of just go along with it. They've given up the will to run. So in this case, and I know that this is maybe a little tough for early in the morning, if you were held in a state of slavery, like a lot of these people were, in particular Nat Turner, would you ever believe that murder, that the killing of other human beings is justified? I know this is a heavy question. If someone was holding you in a state of slavery, beating you, taking away your autonomy, taking away your ability to think, to be a human being, possibly even hurting your family members in front of you, is it ever right, no matter regardless of the situation, to commit murder, even under these conditions? What do you guys think? Think about the conditions that people were living under, these subhuman conditions. Nat Turner decided to eliminate his slave masters to fight back. And so my question is murder ever justified? I need some feedback from you guys. Welcome back, Ahmad. So given the conditions of the American Negro during slavery, is murder ever justified? Ahmad, what do you think, since you just came back? I know Quay stepped off for a second. Zaire, do you have an opinion about this?
Yeah, what was the question? My bad.
The question is, if somebody was holding you and your family or anyone you knew in a state of slavery, is it ever justified to kill those people for the freedom of your family?
Yeah, that's what I do. I go on the killing spree.
Okay. So Zaire is definitely on the side of Nat Turner, believing in what we call holy retribution. And holy retribution is the idea that it's God who wants you to do these things. Okay, so that's our review on Nat Turner. Let me go into today's lesson because I was a little bit late. Thank you, Miss Kelsey, for calling me. I was like literally counting sheep, Miss Kelsey. I don't know what happened. I did not hear my alarm. Literally did not hear my alarm. Okay. So we just reviewed Nat Turner and the Slave Revolt of 1831. I'm going to do a Today in Black History, which is Lewis Lattimore. Where did he go? Oops. I don't think. Oh, here he is. Okay. So every day during this class, I wanted to show you a prominent, not just focus on the negative, but some of the good things. Has anyone ever heard of Lewis Lattimore? No? Okay, Anisha. Well, let me teach you a little bit. Sammy, welcome. So Lewis Lattimore, there is a lot of whisperings in history that Lewis Lattimore was actually the gentleman who came up with the incandescent light bulb and the telephone. The problem with Lewis Lattimore was he was Black. And during this time, he could not apply for a patent. It was physically impossible for him to apply for a patent. So a lot of the ideas that he had were taken by a man named Thomas Edison. Everybody knows Thomas Edison. Edison's considered it's cool, Ahmad. Thomas Edison is considered the father of electricity, which is another historical falsehood. The father of electricity was Nikola Tesla. Tesla was the true genius when it came to electricity. It was Edison. Edison literally had a team of people working for him, and he just loved the attention. I don't know what type of word that is. Counselors, someone who loves their own attention. Is that a narcissist or egomaniac?
Narcissist, yeah. You could say either, I guess.
I think he was like more of a megalomaniac. Is that like completely absorbed? Megalomaniac? Am I saying that right?
I have to look it up. I'm actually not sure.
Megalomaniac. He was just obsessed with himself, and he took credit. So this is Lewis Lattimore, and he was a black inventor. His most important discovery was a longer lasting filament for the electric light. He also helped Alexander Graham Bell obtain the patent for the first telephone. Now, if you look at the word obtain, in a lot of ways it means that he actually helped invent the telephone. So Lewis Lattimore, he was in great demand, and Thomas Edison may not have ever received a patent for his light bulb. Yet, possibly due to the whitewashing of history, Lattimore is not remembered today for his many lasting accomplishments. So this whitewashing of history, so he was known for the electric light and the telephone. So a lot of things that we see daily were created by Black people. They just do not receive the credit that they were supposed to receive because of restrictions in society, either the Black codes or Jim Crow law. So the telephone, this model right here, he actually made the first schematics for a telephone. But the person, Alexander Graham Bell, was the one who went down in history as receiving a telephone, as beginning a telephone. So it was a Black man who invented the telephone. He just could not get credit for it. He also created the electric filament, this right here. So this is Lewis Lattimore's patent drawing of an electric lamp issued September 13, 1881. And this is the public domain, the U.S. Patent Office. So even though he created the electric lamp, he's forgotten to history because of these names such as Alexander Graham Bell and Thomas Edison. These are the ones that they teach you in school, but they usually don't teach you Lewis Lattimore. So if you're interested in Lewis Lattimore and what he did, there is another link inside of this PowerPoint that you can use to connect and read about Lewis Lattimore. So abolitionists, where am I at? So our central question is, how does social change happen? Social change happens because people get tired of the conditions that they are underneath. So in this situation, starting with Nat Turner, we had a revolt in society because of the treatment of slavery. We saw the video on the slave ship, how people were brought over in a cattle-like state, animalistic-like state. They had nets on the boat. The one that really bothered me was the speculum oris, and that was used for, I believe, a long time. And that contraption was kind of used to pry the throat open, and they would put food through a tunnel smashed to keep these slaves alive. So all of those things that were going on in the United States as far as slavery, forced servitude, it boiled to a point where some people could not take it. And the question that I asked was, were all white people for slavery? And the answer is no. They had allies called abolitionists. So how have individuals and groups fought? This is our overall question. Fought for social change historically, and how do these social movements continue today? When we do our section, we're going to do a Black Lives Matter actual study of a social movement in a week or here too. These social changes are continuing, even though Nat Turner, we're not in a slavery or forced servitude state. We are still fighting social injustice. We are still fighting racial injustice in the United States. So the social change that we're focusing on today is the changes in American society after the revolt of Nat Turner and the American Civil War. We're going to look at a gentleman named John Brown and other prominent post-Civil War abolitionists. So an abolitionist, it's in black there, is a person who just disagreed with slavery. They were an ally, they were against slavery. Let's see, I have an article here that gives you, the listing of some of the great abolitionists. Some we may know, some we may not. So let's just take a look at that. I'm going to reshare my screen with you about black abolitionists. Okay, so the abolitionist movement. The abolitionist movement was an organized effort to end the practice of slavery in the United States. We can add all that stuff, but an abolitionist is simply a person who sought to abolish slavery during the 19th century. More specifically, those individuals sought their immediate and full emancipation of slaves. So these were not individuals that thought a war needed to be fought. They knew that slavery was an abomination, an affliction, and their goal was to eradicate slavery and slave owners. They tried the what we call diplomatic way first by writing letters. They tried to do it by legislation, but some of them did not work. This will give you some of the information. I'm not going to go through all of it. I just wanted to put up some famous abolitionists that you may or may not have heard of. William Lloyd Garrison, he was a writer, and he started a publication called The Liberator, which supported the immediate freeing of all enslaved men and women. Frederick Douglass, who was a slave who taught, actually was reading about Frederick Douglass last night, who learned how to read and worked his way all the way up to, he didn't become a per se congressman, but he did have the influence of the Law 13, 14, 15 amendments and the formation of the first Black troops to fight in the Civil War. Harriet Beecher Stowe, she was an author and abolitionist who best known for her novel Uncle Tom's Cabin. One of these days we'll get into Uncle Tom's Cabin. But Uncle Tom was not a sellout. That's a common misconception. Susan B. Anthony, if you guys are probably too young to actually have a Susan B. Anthony dollar, but she was an author, speaker, and a women's rights activist who supported the abolitionist movement. John Brown. John Brown was a radical abolitionist who organized various raids and uprisings, including the infamous raid on Harper's Ferry, Virginia. Harriet Tubman, people know her as a Black Moses. She was a fugitive slave and abolitionist who helped known for escaping slaves reach the North via the Underground Railroad. And Sojourner Truth, best known for her speech, Ain't I a Woman? Truth was both an abolitionist and a woman's rights advocate. So what is an abolitionist? What did they support? What was the goal of abolitionists? What did they want?
They wanted to be free.
Yes, good. They wanted the
I wanted just to live their life instead of somebody telling them what to do, right?
Absolutely. They wanted to eradicate slavery altogether. They did not believe that slavery was a humane practice. Thank you, Zaire. That they wanted to get rid of slavery altogether. This is a quote from the 1960s, but it relates. Has anyone ever heard this quote? By any means necessary.
Yeah.
Who said that, Ahmad?
I don't know.
It's okay. You've heard of it though, right?
Yeah.
That was said by Malcolm X.
Right?
Yep.
Say the quote again.
By any means necessary.
Oh yeah, we hear that joint every time. He really made that up.
Yes, that was one of his favorite speeches, and they were asking Malcolm, how would he achieve his freedom and equality? And he said, by any means necessary, any means. And he wasn't talking about diplomatic solution. Malcolm X was talking about military. He was talking about arming himself, arming other Black people, and fighting back completely. So abolitionists, without abolitionists, there would have been no Malcolm X. So these early abolitionists who fought back, our focus today is on John Brown. So let me bring up John Brown. Let's see. So John Brown was a prominent abolitionist. And the other word I wanted you to know, the social movement was to abolish the practice of slavery in the United States. So the 13th and 15th Amendments, here is an actual picture of the 13th Amendment. It's not the whole thing here, but the 13th Amendment abolished all involuntary servitude except in the case of committing a crime. Yes, Quay, all of these slides will be up on Summit, okay? So if you go to Summit and go to resources, this PowerPoint is already up there. And that's for all the students. All the PowerPoints are always going to be up on Summit. So when you go to answer your questions, it will be there. I think talked about this a little bit early. Are prisoners today an example of long-term effects of the 13th Amendment? I'm going to add there if you have Netflix, there is an eye-opening documentary called The 13th. And it shows how the 13th Amendment in a lot of ways was not really undone. That slavery truly does exist in America. And we have traded in plantations. We have traded in work farms and Jim Crow laws for mass incarceration. So instead of having people being stuck in a state of servitude, oops. So being stuck in a state of servitude, you could watch the 13th and find out. Oh, Mr. Roy showed that last year, Miss Kelsey?
He did. I don't remember which class, and I don't know if people in this class were in that class, so I wondered if they had seen it. Oh, Zaire, did you watch it?
What?
The Netflix documentary called 13th, which Mr. Townsend just mentioned. I think Mr. Rogers showed it in his classes last year. It's really good. Maud said he didn't. You guys should watch it if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, we should. Maybe I'll put some. Maybe I'll gather some clips together for class. The problem is when we put our classes up on Netflix, on YouTube, I'm sorry, we get copyright disclaimers from YouTube saying that we can't put that content up.
That's right.
Yeah, so I've had a couple of videos cut short because of that. So I'll just add a hyperlink inside of Summit. That way, if you guys have Netflix, because I ain't giving all of y'all my password because I'll never be able to use TV again. Okay. So to abolish means to do away, remove. That's a simplified way of saying what it means to abolish something. It means to get rid of it. So the 13th Amendment, this is the actual 13th Amendment. Section 1, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for a crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. And Section 2 is Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. So to sum this up, the 13th Amendment outlawed and banned involuntary servitude and slavery, except for a punishment for a crime. So that's the 13th Amendment loophole. Even though people were freed from the fields, people were freed from involuntary servitude, they could still be placed in a state of slavery. And we saw this during the Jim Crow presentation, where these boys have been put on these farms to work the land. In the South, it's a lot more common than it is in the North. In the North, you may see, I don't know if you guys have ever been driving along and seen people on the side of the road with those bright orange vests on. Have you ever seen those? And they're like picking up trash on the side of the highway.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's prisoners doing physical labor. So in a lot of ways, the 13th Amendment, even though it outlawed slavery, it left this loophole for people who were convicted of a crime. And if we know anything about American society at that time, it was not a fair system. Jim Crow laws, the black codes, we saw that after Nat Turner revolted, they had special sessions of Congress to make it harder for African Americans. No jury trials. You could be sold back into remember the vagrancy laws, that if you didn't have a job that you could prove that you worked for a white person, they could literally auction you off, which means you could not go from town to town looking for work. So even though the 13th Amendment on paper technically freed a lot of slaves and so-called abolished slavery, a new form of slavery was put into place, such as the black codes and Jim Crow laws, which restricted social movement. That was your first checkpoint. So the 14th and 15th Amendment, after the 13th Amendment, which was the abolishment of slavery, there was a lot of backlash in society. We saw groups such as the Ku Klux Klan being started after the abolishment of slavery. We saw a lot of people terrorizing and really straight up torturing free blacks in the South. So the 13th Amendment, in a lot of ways, they lost their protection, and free roaming bands of white dissidents could murder, could kill, could burn down houses. Malcolm X's father was killed by the Ku Klux Klan. That's where a lot of his angst.
Say that again. My fault. Say that again.
Malcolm X's father was murdered by the Ku Klux Klan.
Oh man, where we're at?
Yes. His father was a big man. He was about 6'4", 240 pounds. He was not a guy that was scared easily. And he was an educated Negro who was not afraid to speak out against white supremacy. First, they firebombed his house with Malcolm in it when he was 6 years old. And they told him if he needed to stop preaching this anti-white sentiment because he was stirring up good black folks. That was the quote. When Malcolm X's father, Reverend Little, resisted, they tied him to the train tracks and let a train run over him. And the real kicker of all of this was that the insurance company would not pay Malcolm and his family the life insurance payout because they said his father committed suicide. I don't know how someone can tie themselves to railroad tracks. I'm sorry, go ahead, Ahmad.
I said, wow.
Yeah.
Out of pocket.
Yeah. So these acts of cruelty, because of the freedom and the protections of the 13th, 14th Amendment, they backlash and they cause social changes.
More like torture, though, right?
I mean, yeah, they beat him. They beat him and they tied him to railroad tracks. I can't think of that. Pretty much defines torture. And the only reason that they did it is because he was an educated, strong, outspoken black man.
That's out of pocket. That man seen his death coming.
And he refused to back down. He refused to back down. He was not going to cower to.
At least he went like a soldier. He went like a nut. He went like a soldier. He got.
Yes, he was, and his bravery and his willingness to speak out. When we get to the 1950s and 60s, we're going to do a unit on Malcolm X to see how these social conditions can, put him in motion to become the civil rights leader that he did become. So we're got about 4 minutes left because Mr. Townsend was in sleepy land this morning. So we'll cover real quick the 14th and 15th Amendments, and then we'll go into John Brown and the rest of the abolitionists next week. So the 14th Amendment and the 15th Amendment provided equal protection underneath the law and the right for black men to vote. There are 3 different hyperlinks on here. The reason that I put these hyperlinks in is if you guys are ever interested in finding out more information about these topics, you can simply look them up. Over there on the right, this seal is of America. It says E pluribus unum. That is Latin. Does anybody have any idea what that statement means? If you have a dollar bill or maybe even on a quarter, have we ever seen this statement before? E pluribus unum.
No, I never seen that before.
Okay. It's a Latin phrase, and it means from many, one. It's supposed to be our national motto for the United States. Somebody just asked a question about checkpoint 1. Checkpoint 1, Sammy, is on Summit, and it asks you, how did Jim Crow laws restrict Black Americans? The information is on Summit. There's literally a PowerPoint, there's articles, look underneath the announcements, and you should be able to answer it. If you can't find it, I can directly send you the checkpoint itself. Does that help, Sammy? Okay, so Ahmad and Sammy, let me write that down. I'll send you guys the PowerPoint and the checkpoint. Okay, so just real quick, I got to stop mid here. Let me just for the folks that were worried about Summit, let me show you where your checkpoint is for this class. Hello. I don't know why I'm not getting Summit up. Hold on. Okay, I got it. All right, so if you go into your African American histories studies, everybody see Summit here? I'm running out of time. Come on, Summit. Trying to get. Okay, can you guys all see this?
Yeah.
Okay, so when you go to Summit, there's going to be the 13th, there's all these different announcements that I put up. So when you look for checkpoint 1 for African American history, go over here. And I'll just put up a general one here, since it's not answered. So this was checkpoint 1. How did the Jim Crow law discriminate against Black people in the USA? Inside of your Summit, you should have resources. So if you go to activity and resources, there is a Jim Crow laws and there is a PowerPoint right here. And this will give you the Jim Crow laws and how to answer those questions. I will send them to you, Ahmad and Sammy, individually. Does anyone else need a copy of the presentation on Jim Crow laws to answer checkpoint 1? Send it in chat to me. Okay. So Sammy and Ahmad, I will take care of you guys as far as checkpoint 1. We will continue next class with John Brown and Frederick Douglass and the American Abolitionists and what the purpose of American Abolitionists is. Thank you, Miss Kat. Thank you, Miss Kelsey, for having my back this morning. I appreciate you ladies very much. And yeah, alarm clock.
Get that sleep, Mr. Townsend.
I'm trying. All right. Thanks, everybody. I will see you guys on Tuesday. Okay.
Did you check my what you call it?
What's your whatchamacallit, Quay? You gotta be a little bit more specific than that.
Oh, my checkpoint.
Your checkpoint? I think I already took care of your checkpoint, Quay. Let me check. Yeah, you're done. You're on green. So you're caught up for this class. Okay.
What you say? I'm sorry, my internet was acting up. What you say?
I said you're on green. I graded and your checkpoint, and right now you're on green.
All right, thank you.
Okay. So Ahmad and Sammy, I will send you emails with Jim Crow laws and checkpoint 1 when class is over. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
Yeah.
Have a good day.